For more than 3,000 years, sailors on separate continents described the same impossible figure, a human form rising from open water. No shared maps, no shared language, no shared horizon. Ancient Assyrians wrote of sea beings with human shape long before European voyages began. Greek mariners recorded women of the waves lifting from darkness. In 1493, Christopher Columbus noted seeing 3 mermaids off Hispaniola and remarked they were not as beautiful as the stories claimed. In 1614, John Smith claimed he saw one near Newfoundland. Japanese coastal traditions tell of human-shaped sea spirits. West African lore speaks of mamawata. These were not campfire inventions, they were written into ship logs, preserved by men who understood the cost of ridicule. Tonight, we follow the boundary between environment and imagination, tracing how biology, physics, and the human mind may have shaped a legend that refused to fade. But before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight, and what time is it where you are? Reading your comments and stories is one of my favorite parts of this calm little community. If this space brings you peace and wonder, it would mean a lot if you tapped like or subscribed. And if you're already part of this journey, thank you for helping it grow. So now take a deep breath, let your shoulders loosen, and together, let us drift toward the shapes that once convinced the world a woman lived beneath the sea. Before any shape can be believed, light itself must make a quiet agreement with the eye. As it slips from open air into the denser skin of water, it slows and bends, changing direction without announcing the turn. This gentle refraction shifts outlines from where they truly rest, so that a distant form drifts slightly from its source, like a reflection that has forgotten its mirror. What appears straight softens, what appears near withdraws, and what seems still may only be waiting for the next ripple to rearrange it. Across wide surfaces that gleam like polished metal, distance loosens its certainty. The eye searches for familiar markers, trees, stones, shadows, yet finds only brightness and motion. Without reference, scale becomes a quiet guess. A small object lifted by a swell may borrow the stature of something vast, while something large sinking into a trough may seem to vanish entirely. The horizon offers no correction, only a thin line where sky and water share the same pale breath. Color, too, slips away by degrees. The longer wavelengths fade first, reds dissolving into gray within a few body lengths beneath the surface. Oranges follow, then yellows, until only the cooler blues continue onward, traveling deeper and farther than the rest. In such light, forms lose their warmth and their detail, becoming silhouettes washed in a single tone. Edges blur, depth disguises itself as flatness. When the sun lingers low, contrast thins even more. The world turns soft at its borders, as though painted in diluted ink. Under these conditions, the visual system receives fragments rather than wholes. It does what it has always done, it completes. Neural circuits shaped across ancient landscapes carry a simple directive: assemble meaning quickly, favor recognition over doubt. A partial curve becomes a shoulder, a dark oval becomes a head, a cluster of shadows gathers itself into posture. This tendency is not a flaw but an inheritance. Through uncounted generations, survival favored minds that recognized living forms at once. Mistaking a branch for a figure carried little cost, while missing a figure that truly stood there could end a story forever. So the brain learned to accept resemblance as evidence. It fills absence with possibility, smoothing gaps with invention, so subtle that the result feels discovered rather than created. Over open water, this quiet artistry grows stronger. The surface shifts without rest, light fractures again and again, and every moving crest redraws the scene. Vision works harder, stitching moment to moment, persuading itself that continuity exists. In that effort, imagination does not replace reality. It collaborates with it, supplying structure where signals arrive incomplete. What emerges is a perception, both faithful and embellished, a partnership between physics and expectation, steady as breathing, delicate as mist. Ink once dried on a page, while the vessel that carried it rocked in slow rhythm, the words steady even as the deck beneath them moved. In that quiet script, a navigator described 3 figures rising from the water beside his route, noting with mild surprise that they lacked the grace promised by old tales. The observation remained simple, almost casual, yet it preserved a meeting between expectation and biology. The creatures he watched belonged to a lineage unknown to most travelers of his era. Along warm coastal shallows lived gentle herbivorous mammals whose lives unfolded just beneath the surface film. Their bodies were round and deliberate, their skin pale and faintly creased, their movements unhurried as drifting clouds. When a mother lifted her young to breathe, she cradled it against her chest, supporting it with forelimbs shaped like soft paddles. Milk flowed from glands positioned high on her torso, a placement rare among animals of the sea, yet ordinary for mammals shaped by ancient terrestrial ancestry. Seen from a distance, such a moment arranged itself into a silhouette that echoed human posture. The curve of the adult's upper body rose first, vertical for a breath or two, the calf pressed close as if embraced. Water slipped from their forms in narrow streams, tracing lines that suggested shoulders and arms, their snouts tilted upward, nostrils opening like small dark commas, while their eyes, set forward more than those of fish, seemed to regard the horizon with quiet awareness. For sailors accustomed only to scales and fins, this outline belonged to no familiar category. The natural histories of Europe held little record of creatures that grazed on seagrass, yet breathed air, that bore live young and nursed them, that surfaced with slow intention instead of darting motion. Without a name to anchor the sight, the mind reached for the nearest shape it already understood. Recognition settled gently as mist settles across still ground. The animals themselves continued their calm routines, rising and sinking in patient intervals. Their tails, broad and rounded, moved with measured strokes that stirred the water but never shattered it. Barnacles sometimes freckled their backs, and faint scars mapped the years of their passage through coral channels and mangrove roots. Nothing in their nature aimed to astonish. They fed, rested, surfaced, and descended again, guided by instincts older than any charted sea lane. That brief encounter between observer and animal left behind a line of ink that endures long after the ripples closed. In it lives a small intersection of worlds, one shaped by myth carried across generations, the other by evolution moving quietly through warm coastal tides. A vibration begins where no eye can follow, a slow trembling that passes from one body into another, carried not by light but by touch. In the open sea, sound moves this way with quiet efficiency, traveling nearly 4 times faster through water than through air, as though the ocean itself prefers messages that cannot be seen. Every tone slips easily into the surrounding vastness, spreading outward in widening circles, soft yet persistent, until distance forgets where it started. Far below the surface, great whales release long sequences of notes that unfurl like ribbons through the deep. These calls do not hurry. They stretch, fold, and rise again, sometimes drifting for miles before fading into the background murmur of currents. To a listener above, the sea seems silent, yet beneath that impression, a layered chorus continues without pause, its phrases shaped by lungs, pressure, and ancient instinct. The water carries each resonance faithfully, preserving its structure with little loss, so that even faint voices arrive intact long after their source has vanished from view. Closer to shore, another sound sometimes lifts into the night. Seals, resting along darkened coasts, release cries that bend and waver, tones that resemble distant human voices shaped by longing. Their calls slide between pitches, part moan, part song, the sound lingering just long enough for the mind to search for meaning within it. Across a still surface, such voices travel cleanly, unbroken by obstacles, until they reach ears that cannot easily trace direction in the dark. Above, the vessel itself contributes its own quiet music. Wind threads through ropes and wooden spars, drawing out soft harmonics as though the rigging were a harp strung for invisible hands. Lines tighten, loosen, then hum again, producing sustained notes that hover in the air. Each tone blends with the slow percussion of water against the hull, forming patterns that seem almost arranged, almost deliberate, though no composer guides them. Low frequencies deepen this impression. Vibrations with long wavelengths pass through solid structure as readily as through liquid, entering the body as sensation rather than sound. They settle into bone and muscle, subtle pulses that feel purposeful, like signals meant to be understood. In darkness, where sight offers little to balance perception, such sensations gather weight, suggesting presence where only motion exists. When rest has been thin and hours stretch without clear boundary, the mind grows more willing to shape uncertainty into form. Neuroscience observes that fatigue softens the brain's filters, allowing ambiguous signals to pass with less scrutiny. A drifting tone may gather intention, a distant cry may gather identity. The ocean does not alter its voice, yet the listener changes, and in that gentle shift, the night becomes filled with meanings that hover just beyond certainty, carried on waves that never cease their patient song. Days once marked by variety begin instead to resemble one another, like identical shells placed in a quiet row. At sea, time loosens its edges. Morning arrives without novelty. Evening settles without contrast, and the mind, shaped for changing landscapes and shifting company, adjusts slowly to a world where little alters except the count of hours. Neural systems that thrive on variation receive the same signals again and again until repetition becomes the loudest presence of all. Months may pass with no new terrain, no unfamiliar streets, no fresh arrangement of faces. Cognitive research drawn from long maritime expeditions notes how the brain responds to such constancy. Regions that track environment and orientation grow less active when surroundings remain unchanged, conserving effort the way muscles rest when movement ceases. This conservation carries a subtle cost. Attention drifts more easily, thoughts lengthen their wanderings, and imagination finds wider spaces in which to unfold its private scenes. Human beings are patterned for companionship as deeply as for language. When voices grow scarce and conversation thins to brief exchanges, social circuitry continues its search for interaction. Psychologists observing crews during extended voyages describe how the mind sometimes supplies what is missing, shaping impressions of presence from minimal cues. A shadow glimpsed at the edge of sight, or a faint motion in the distance, may gather significance simply because the brain is accustomed to finding meaning in the company of others. Sleep, too, alters its rhythm in such conditions. Shipboard schedules, shifting watches, and the gentle unrest of constant motion divide rest into fragments. Instead of long continuous cycles, the brain receives short intervals, each one ending before deeper stages fully unfold. Studies of fragmented sleep show that perception during waking hours becomes more fluid under these patterns. Boundaries between memory, imagination, and immediate sensation soften, allowing images from within to mingle quietly with signals arriving from outside. Monotony strengthens this blending. When stimulation remains low for extended periods, the mind grows more suggestible, more inclined to elaborate on incomplete impressions. It is not a failure, but a form of adaptation, a way of enriching an environment that offers little change. The same faculty that composes stories and dreams begins to color waking perception, adding detail where none was provided, refining outlines that were never clear. Memory follows its own gentle transformation. Recollections formed in isolation tend to smooth themselves over time, losing small irregularities while preserving emotional tone. Events repeated in thought grow more vivid, not because they were seen more clearly, but because each remembrance polishes them slightly. Naval clinicians writing about sailors returning from long deployments often note how confidently such memories are held, even when details shift with each telling. Within this quiet interplay of solitude, fatigue, and repetition, the mind continues its patient work, shaping experience from whatever fragments it receives, sustaining its inner world with the same steady devotion it has carried across every landscape humans have ever crossed. Far below the reach of sunlight, the planet continues shaping lives that few eyes have witnessed. Pressure gathers there in immense weight, darkness rests without interruption, and yet within that hidden expanse, movement persists, slow and deliberate, as though time itself has thickened. In that depth, evolution follows pathways unlike those on land, sculpting bodies according to rules written in cold and silence. For centuries, sailors spoke of vast, tentacled forms slipping through unseen layers, their accounts drifting between curiosity and doubt. Only in the early years of the 21st century did cameras finally meet one of these elusive beings alive, a giant squid unfolding its long arms in patient suspension. Its motion appeared almost weightless, each limb tracing pale arcs through the black water, its great eyes reflecting faint light like distant moons. The creature had existed all along, moving through its own realm, while human certainty waited far above. Other inhabitants glow without flame. Anglerfish carry small lanterns that bloom from delicate stalks, extending before their faces. Within these organs live colonies of luminous bacteria, partners in a quiet exchange of shelter for light. The glow sways gently as the fish drifts, a soft beacon that draws smaller animals nearer until they vanish in a sudden closing of jaws. In such places, illumination does not belong to the sun, but to life itself, each shimmer produced by chemistry, unfolding in living cells. Some species possess bodies so clear they nearly escape sight. Transparent fish glide through the water like drifting glass, their bones faint as brushstrokes, their organs suspended within like tiny constellations. Light passes through them with little resistance, rendering them almost absent except for the slight distortion of whatever lies beyond. To encounter such a form is to witness anatomy reduced to suggestion, structure softened until it resembles thought more than flesh. Bioluminescent organisms often gather in loose constellations, outlining passing shapes in momentary halos. When a swimmer moves among them, its passage becomes visible through the light stirred in its wake, a silhouette traced by living sparks. These fleeting contours linger just long enough to suggest outlines that the eye recognizes before they dissolve again into darkness. Certain deep-dwelling animals carry proportions that echo familiar symmetry. A narrow torso, paired appendages, a suggestion of posture. These arrangements appear not through intention, but through shared biological constraints. Evolution, working with the same physical laws, sometimes arrives at forms that resemble one another despite vast distance in lineage. The resemblance is gentle, an incidental rhyme within nature's long poem. Such beings do not imitate legend, yet their presence shows how readily the natural world shapes forms that seem to belong to imagination. The ocean does not resist strangeness. It cultivates it quietly, layer by layer, until reality itself holds silhouettes as graceful and unusual as any story once carried across the surface of the sea. In records kept across long expeditions, another pattern emerges, written not in charts or coordinates, but in the subtle lean of attention itself. Crews were often composed of young men whose lives before departure had been filled with voices, glances, and the ordinary nearness of others. Then, without gradual transition, that familiar presence vanished for months or years. The mind, accustomed to social detail as a constant nourishment, continued to reach for it the way roots reach for water even in dry soil. Neuroscience observes that longing is not only an emotion, but a shaping force. Circuits associated with attachment and reward remain active even when what they seek is absent. In such conditions, perception does not remain neutral. It begins to favor interpretations that echo what is missed. A distant outline, a brief movement, a form glimpsed only partially may be guided gently toward resemblance with what the heart has practiced remembering. This is not invention in the theatrical sense, but a quiet adjustment, like a lens turning almost imperceptibly until blur suggests familiarity. Time deepens this effect. When days pass without meaningful variation in companionship, mental imagery grows more vivid, as though the inner world compensates for what the outer world withholds. Psychologists studying prolonged isolation note that the brain increases its sensitivity to emotionally relevant shapes, especially those tied to affection or desire. Signals that might otherwise remain abstract can gather softness, contour, and implied expression. The transformation occurs below awareness, within perceptual pathways that evolved to link survival with recognition of other human beings. Desire itself carries a refining influence. Cognitive models show that when memory and imagination cooperate, they tend to idealize rather than diminish. Features become smoother, proportions more balanced, movement more graceful. Over time, repeated recollection strengthens these refinements, polishing the image until it holds a quiet symmetry. Such shaping does not require conscious effort. It unfolds automatically, guided by neural reward systems that respond more strongly to pleasing forms than to neutral ones. Stories passed between companions then take on this same polish. Each telling preserves the core moment, yet subtly heightens its elegance, aligning description with what listeners most easily picture and retain. Cultural transmission studies reveal that narratives with attractive or harmonious imagery travel farther and endure longer than those without. Beauty, in this way, acts as a current beneath language, carrying certain visions forward while others settle unnoticed. Within the solitude of extended voyages, perception, memory, and desire share a single canvas. The mind, still tuned for connection, traces gentle shapes upon that surface, blending fragments of sight with impressions drawn from within. What results is neither illusion nor deliberate creation, but a meeting place where absence and imagination quietly agree upon a form. Darkness at sea does not always remain dark. In certain waters, night carries a hidden reservoir of light, waiting within countless microscopic lives suspended just beneath the surface. These organisms, small as drifting dust, hold within their cells chemical systems that release brief flashes when stirred. The reaction begins when motion disturbs them, a chain of molecules meeting in sudden union, producing a pulse of blue radiance, so soft it seems borrowed from starlight. When something passes through such water, the path does not remain invisible. Each movement awakens thousands of these tiny lanterns, and together they sketch a living outline around whatever has crossed their field. A swimming body becomes a ribbon of light, every motion traced by sparks that bloom and fade in gentle succession. The glow lingers for a breath before dissolving, leaving darkness to close quietly behind it. Waves themselves can carry this phenomenon across great distances. As their crests fold and release, they scatter luminous flickers along their edges, turning ordinary swells into rolling lines of pale fire. Even a single drop falling from an oar or fin may ignite a brief star where it lands, a point of brightness suspended for an instant before vanishing. Such displays occur without sound or warning, appearing as if the sea has chosen to reveal a hidden script written just beneath its surface. Fish moving through these waters take on a new appearance. Their forms, otherwise unseen, become visible through the light stirred by their motion. A tail flick leaves a curved stroke behind it. A turning body draws a widening arc, and for a moment, the creature exists only as a shape of radiance, suspended in blackness. The effect is delicate rather than dazzling, more like breath on glass than flame in air. This quiet illumination arises from a partnership between biology and physics. The chemicals responsible, often luciferin and its companion enzyme, release energy directly as light rather than heat, an efficient transformation shaped by evolution across uncounted generations. In the deep, where sunlight never arrives, many species rely on such internal lamps for signaling, camouflage, or the gentle lure of prey. Near the surface, smaller organisms use their glow as a brief defense, a sudden shimmer that may startle or distract whatever brushes too close. Seen from above, these responses gather into patterns that feel almost intentional, as if the water were sketching its own fleeting constellations. A drifting shape can appear wrapped in brightness, its contours softened by the surrounding shimmer. For a few heartbeats, movement and light become inseparable, and the boundary between solid form and luminous trace grows difficult to distinguish, like a figure drawn not with ink but with living light. Along the coldest seas, light sometimes forgets its usual path. In polar air, layers of temperature stack gently upon one another, each band holding a slightly different density. When light passes through these invisible strata, it bends again and again, curving along the gradients as though guided by transparent glass. This bending, known to physics as atmospheric refraction, can lift distant images upward from beyond the horizon and suspend them in midair. Such conditions give rise to a phenomenon long called fata morgana, a name borrowed from old legends yet grounded in precise optics. In these moments, the boundary between sky and water loosens. Shapes far away appear stretched into tall columns, their proportions elongated by the layered air that redirects their rays toward the observer. A low object becomes a vertical figure, its base hidden while its upper outline rises like a pillar formed of light. Across frozen coasts, seals often rest upon drifting ice or narrow ledges. From a great distance, their compact bodies would normally remain unnoticed, blending into the pale stillness around them. Yet, when refracted through stratified air, their forms can lengthen dramatically. A rounded back may transform into a slender torso, a lifted head into something resembling shoulders poised above the surface. The transformation does not occur within the animal itself, but within the pathway its reflected light must travel. Ice crystals, suspended in mist, can deepen the effect. Each tiny facet acts as a minute prism, redirecting and slightly multiplying the image before it reaches the eye. Edges soften, outlines waver, and the figure seems to shimmer between solidity and vapor. To someone watching from afar, the sight may appear neither fully real nor fully illusory, as though it belonged equally to sea and sky. Historical journals from northern voyages occasionally describe distant forms rising through fog banks, shapes that seemed upright and strangely proportioned. The observers who recorded them worked with the visual evidence available in that instant, unaware of the layered atmosphere guiding the scene. They noted silhouettes that suggested posture rather than anatomy, presences that lingered briefly before dissolving as temperature gradients shifted and the refractive alignment slipped away. The physics behind such visions rests in simple principles. Light changes direction when it moves between regions of differing density, and polar air, cooled unevenly by ice and water, often arranges itself into horizontal bands that act like stacked lenses. When these lenses align just so, they lift fragments of the distant world into unexpected positions, stretching and reshaping them while preserving enough detail for recognition to take hold. Within that quiet geometry of air and light, the horizon becomes a canvas where reality is gently redrawn. Forms lengthen, distance folds, and familiar creatures borrow unfamiliar outlines, all without sound or motion, as though the atmosphere itself were sketching soft, vertical figures upon the farthest edge of sight. Before language forms a thought, recognition has already begun its quiet work. Within a fraction of a second after the eyes receive an image, signals travel along neural pathways toward a small region on the underside of the temporal lobe, an area neuroscientists call the fusiform face area. This cluster of cells responds with unusual precision to arrangements resembling eyes, noses, and mouths, lighting with activity even when the resemblance is faint. It does not wait for certainty. It responds to suggestion. Because of this sensitivity, the mind perceives faces where none were intentionally placed, patterns in stone, drifting clouds, the grain of wood, all can gather into expressions that seem to gaze back. The effect arises from the brain's preference for rapid interpretation. Visual information arrives incomplete and fleeting, so perception favors swift conclusions rather than careful doubt. A pair of dark marks above a line may be enough. Once the pattern is assembled, awareness accepts it almost instantly. This tendency reflects an inheritance shaped across immense spans of time. Early humans who recognized other beings quickly held an advantage, since social allies and hidden threats both required immediate notice. Evolution, therefore, rewarded nervous systems that erred toward detection. A mistaken perception cost little, while a missed presence might carry grave consequence. Over generations, this bias became woven into the architecture of vision, encouraging recognition even when evidence remained partial. The process unfolds automatically. Photons strike the retina, electrical impulses pass along the optic nerve, and specialized circuits begin sorting shapes according to familiar templates. Among these templates, the human form holds priority. Studies using rapid image flashes show that silhouettes, suggesting a head and shoulders, can be identified faster than most other objects, sometimes before conscious awareness registers the sight. The brain does not deliberate. It matches patterns with remarkable speed, as though greeting an expected guest. Ambiguity strengthens this effect. When outlines blur or details fade, the perceptual system fills gaps with its most practiced assumptions. Gentle curves may be interpreted as posture, intersecting shadows as limbs, symmetry as intention. The resulting image feels discovered rather than constructed because the assembly occurs beneath the threshold of deliberate thought. Neural activity completes the scene while attention simply receives it. This readiness to perceive faces and figures does not signal error. It reveals a system tuned for connection, a visual language shaped by countless encounters with other humans. Even in environments where no person stands, the circuitry remains alert, prepared to recognize familiar structure at once. Within that readiness lies a quiet principle of cognition. Perception leans toward meaning, and meaning often takes the shape of a face. Long before maps traced coastlines with measured ink, stories traveled the same routes as salt and cedar, carried in memory rather than cargo. Among the earliest of these seaborne traditions was the reverence for a goddess whose presence belonged partly to land and partly to water. In the temples of ancient Assyria, she was known as Atargatis, a figure described in carvings and hymns as possessing a human upper form joined to the body of a fish, an image both serene and enigmatic. Her legend unfolded in gentle layers of transformation. One telling spoke of a divine being who, overcome by sorrow, entered a sacred lake and allowed her lower half to become scaled and finned, so she might dwell forever within its depths. Another described her as a guardian of fertility and life, a protector whose domain bridged rivers, seas, and the creatures that moved between them. These variations did not compete with one another. They drifted side by side, like currents meeting without conflict, each preserving a different reflection of the same sacred outline. Trade carried her image far beyond the walls where her name was first sung. Merchants traveling between Mesopotamia, the Levant, and the Mediterranean exchanged more than goods. They shared symbols, beliefs, and impressions gathered along distant shores. Through these encounters, the form of a fish-tailed woman appeared in new regions, sometimes altered in detail, yet recognizable in essence. Clay tablets, engraved seals, and later mosaics reveal how widely her likeness spread, adapting to local styles while keeping the quiet balance of human and aquatic grace. Such myths did not arise in isolation from lived experience. Coastal peoples spent long hours watching tides, wildlife, and the shifting line where water met sky. Observations gathered slowly, then settled into imagination, where they mingled with reverence and speculation. A creature glimpsed briefly might lend its contour to a divine narrative. A pattern in nature might become a symbol of sacred design. Over generations, these impressions blended until the boundary between witness and wonder softened. Cultural historians note that myth often functions as a vessel, holding fragments of reality within a framework of meaning. In the figure of Atargatis, natural forms and spiritual thought coexisted without contradiction. The human shape suggested familiarity. The fish tail suggested belonging to the unseen world below the surface. Together they formed an image that expressed connection between realms, a visual language shaped by both observation and devotion. As her story moved from harbor to harbor, it gathered accents from each shore, yet the central vision endured. The persistence of that form across centuries reveals how readily the human mind unites what it sees with what it imagines, allowing each to refine the other until the result feels timeless, like a memory carried not by one culture alone, but by many, all gazing toward the same horizon where land ends and legend begins. On fragments of ancient pottery, preserved in quiet museum light, figures appear with wings instead of fins. Their bodies are feathered, their feet curved into talons, their faces calm and human. These are the earliest sirens of Greek imagination, not dwellers of the sea, but beings of air and stone, perched upon cliffs or markers of the dead. Their songs were said to drift across wind rather than tide, their presence linked to thresholds, crossroads, and the unseen border between life and memory. In early Greek art, sculptors and painters shaped them with careful symmetry, combining the torso of a woman with the body of a bird. This form did not arise randomly. Birds had long symbolized passage between realms, able to move through sky while humans remained earthbound. To ancient observers, wings suggested access to distant knowledge, while feathers implied distance from ordinary life. The siren's hybrid anatomy reflected these associations, giving visible shape to ideas about guidance, temptation, and the pull of the unknown. Over centuries, as cultures met along trade routes and stories crossed languages, the image began to change. Contact with Near Eastern traditions introduced new visual motifs, including figures that blended human features with aquatic ones. Artists, influenced by imported carvings, textiles, and tales, gradually reimagined the siren's body. Feathers softened into flowing lines, talons lengthened into tapering forms, and eventually the lower half took on the contours of a fishtail. The transformation unfolded slowly, each generation adjusting details while preserving the essential idea of an alluring being who belonged partly to another realm. By the Hellenistic period and later Roman times, depictions of sirens with scaled tails appeared more frequently, especially in decorative mosaics and coastal architecture. The shift did not erase the earlier bird-like versions, which continued to appear in some regions, but it added a new visual language that aligned the figure more closely with water. Scholars who study iconographic evolution often note how imagery adapts to local environments. In maritime societies, symbols connected to the sea carry immediate resonance, and mythic forms tend to reflect that familiarity. This gradual reshaping shows how collective imagination behaves, much like a living organism, responding to influence, climate, and exchange. An image, once rooted in wind and wing, could settle into wave and fin without losing its identity. What endured was not a single physical description, but a pattern of meaning, the sense of a presence both inviting and distant, both recognizable and strange. Through this quiet evolution, art revealed how stories shift while remaining themselves. Lines carved into clay or stone preserved each stage, allowing later eyes to trace the path from feathered silhouette to scaled outline. The siren's changing form became a record of cultural motion, a reminder that myth does not stand still, but drifts gently through time, reshaped by every shore it touches. Ink pressed into paper once carried a weight beyond words, especially when written aboard a vessel far from land. A ship's log was not a diary in the casual sense, but an official record maintained with deliberate care. Each line preserved coordinates, wind direction, sail changes, sightings, and events judged important to navigation or safety. Maritime authorities treated these pages as formal documents, sometimes reviewed by patrons, courts, or naval offices, which meant their contents held consequences for those who wrote them. The act of recording demanded discipline. Officers responsible for the log understood that accuracy reflected competence, and competence shaped reputation. A well-kept record suggested skill and reliability, qualities essential for anyone entrusted with command or entrusted with future voyages. Errors or exaggerations could raise doubts, and doubt could close doors to advancement. In this way, the logbook functioned not only as a technical chronicle, but also as a quiet measure of character. Because of this scrutiny, entries tended toward restraint. Language remained plain, descriptions brief, observations stated without flourish. Mariners learned to note what they saw rather than what they imagined, since the purpose of the document lay in usefulness rather than drama. Distances were estimated, bearings marked, unusual events mentioned only as needed. The tone resembled that of a ledger, steady and factual, shaped by necessity rather than storytelling. Fabrication offered little reward in such a context. A sailor who invented details risked more than embarrassment. If a claim proved false, it could damage trust among crew and superiors alike. In an environment where cooperation determined survival, credibility held practical value. Trust ensured that orders would be followed, warnings heeded, and reports believed. To jeopardize that trust for the sake of an invented marvel would have seemed an unwise exchange. Historians who study maritime archives often remark on this understated style. Pages preserved from voyages across centuries reveal handwriting that changes with weather and fatigue, yet the content remains consistent in its clarity. When something unfamiliar appeared, the observer typically described it in the same measured tone used for currents or clouds. The unusual entered the record without ceremony, set alongside routine details as though all belonged to the same continuum of experience. These documents, therefore, offer a rare window into perception unadorned. They capture moments as they were noted at the time, before retelling could soften or reshape them. A sighting written into such a log did not pass first through an audience or a stage. It traveled directly from eye to hand to page, preserved in the steady script of someone aware that each mark might one day be read by others far away. Within that quiet chain of observation and record, the written line becomes more than ink. It becomes a trace of attention itself, a small, enduring imprint left by a watcher who expected the world to be real and wrote accordingly. Gaslight once flickered across velvet curtains, while crowds filed past glass cases, their footsteps softened by carpet and anticipation. Inside one such case rested a figure small enough to be cradled, yet strange enough to hold every gaze. Its skin appeared shriveled, its mouth fixed in a narrow grimace, its limbs curled as though caught between species. Advertisements called it a mermaid from distant seas, preserved as proof that legend had briefly touched the waking world. This specimen became widely known as the Fiji Mermaid, displayed in the 19th century under the direction of the showman P.T. Barnum. Though presented as a marvel retrieved from remote waters, it was, in truth, an elaborate fabrication assembled from parts of different animals, stitched and dried to resemble a hybrid creature. Its unsettling realism came not from accuracy, but from suggestion. The proportions were just plausible enough to quiet doubt for a moment, long enough for curiosity to step closer. Barnum understood that belief often begins in the pause between seeing and questioning. His exhibitions relied on careful staging, printed testimonials, and theatrical storytelling that framed each object as a discovery rather than a display. Visitors encountered the figure within a narrative already prepared for them, one that lent context before scrutiny could fully awaken. In this way, spectacle and persuasion worked together, guiding perception much as a current guides drifting leaves. Yet the same century that welcomed such wonders also nurtured a growing appetite for verification. Scientific societies expanded, newspapers circulated more widely, and public lectures introduced audiences to new standards of evidence. Anatomists examined unusual specimens with trained eyes, comparing structure, texture, and proportion against known forms. Under such attention, the Fiji mermaid's illusion began to thin. Observers recognized seams where different materials met, and the aura of authenticity slowly gave way to recognition of craft. This shift did not banish fascination. Instead, it reshaped it. People continued to visit exhibitions, still drawn by the promise of encountering the extraordinary, but many arrived with a quieter awareness that spectacle might conceal invention. The experience became a dialogue between wonder and discernment, each sharpening the other. Curiosity remained intact, though it now moved alongside a developing habit of inquiry. Cultural historians often view this period as a turning point in public perception. The same society that once accepted marvels at face value began to cultivate a taste for demonstration and proof. Showmanship adapted in response, blending entertainment with hints of scholarship, illusion with fragments of genuine discovery. Displays grew more elaborate, explanations more polished, audiences more attentive to detail. Within that softly lit hall where the small figure rested behind glass, two traditions met without conflict. One was the ancient delight in imagining beings beyond ordinary nature. The other was the emerging practice of examining such claims with patient observation. Between them stood the crafted mermaid, silent and unmoving, a reminder that belief itself can be shaped as carefully as any artifact placed before the eye. Near the boundary between waking and sleep, the mind enters a state neither fully anchored nor fully adrift. In this threshold condition, perception loosens its usual precision, and experience begins to take on a softened texture, as though reality were being viewed through a thin veil. Neuroscientists describe this borderland as a transitional phase where the systems that regulate attention, imagery, and memory overlap more than they do during ordinary alertness. When rest is shortened or divided, one of the first processes affected is REM sleep, the stage associated with vivid dreaming and emotional integration. During healthy cycles, REM arrives in measured intervals, allowing the brain to balance sensory input with internal imagery. If that stage is interrupted repeatedly, its functions do not simply vanish. Instead, fragments of dreamlike activity may drift into waking hours, carried forward like mist that lingers after dawn. Brain scans of sleep-deprived individuals show increased activation in visual association regions, suggesting that internally generated images become more likely to mingle with external perception. As fatigue deepens, the visual system itself grows less stable. Signals from the eyes still arrive, yet the neural circuits that refine them lose some of their usual sharpness. Edges may appear to waver, motion may seem to continue after it has stopped, and faint shapes may gain unexpected clarity. Laboratory studies have recorded how prolonged wakefulness alters activity in the thalamus and occipital cortex, areas responsible for filtering and interpreting visual information. With reduced regulation, minor stimuli can be amplified, while ambiguous forms are more readily completed by the brain's predictive mechanisms. This blending of outer signal and inner imagery creates a state often described as waking dreamfulness. It does not resemble sleep itself, since awareness remains present, but it carries a similar fluidity. Thoughts drift more freely, associations form with little effort, and perception becomes receptive to suggestion. Researchers observing participants kept awake for extended periods note that such individuals sometimes report fleeting figures or patterns that seem vivid, yet vanish upon closer focus. These moments arise not from imagination alone, but from the brain's attempt to stabilize perception while operating with diminished resources. Physiology contributes its own quiet influence. Hormonal rhythms shift when sleep is scarce, affecting neurotransmitters that regulate mood and attention. Levels of dopamine and serotonin may fluctuate, subtly altering how stimuli are prioritized and interpreted. The result is a mind more responsive to faint impressions, more inclined to grant significance to what might otherwise pass unnoticed. Within this altered state, reality remains present yet softened at its edges. Sensation, memory, and expectation share a single stage, each lending color to the others. The experience does not announce itself as unusual. It unfolds gently, like a scene viewed through drifting haze, where perception continues its work even as the boundary between vision and dream grows quietly thin. Numbers sometimes hold a kind of quiet poetry, especially when they measure spaces no footsteps have crossed. The average depth of the global ocean rests near 3.7 kilometers, a distance that, if turned upright, would lift a mountain of water high above most city skylines. Beneath that average lie regions where the seafloor falls away even farther, descending into trenches whose darkness presses down with immense weight. In the Mariana Trench, the deepest known point approaches 11 kilometers, a vertical span so great that familiar landmarks of land would disappear within it without a trace. Such scale exists mostly beyond daily thought, not because it is hidden, but because it resists comparison. Human perception evolved among trees, hills, and horizons that revealed themselves within walking distance. The senses learned to judge space by steps, to measure depth by the reach of a hand or the drop of a stone. On land, distance usually offers clues, textures sharpen as one nears them, and sound returns in echoes shaped by nearby surfaces. These cues shaped the nervous system over millions of years, guiding how it interprets the world. Beneath the sea, those ancestral expectations find little to hold. Pressure increases swiftly with descent, compressing any pocket of air and reshaping materials that would remain unchanged above ground. Light fades until it vanishes, leaving vision without its primary guide. Temperature shifts, currents slide through unseen layers, and the terrain stretches in vast plains or plunges in sudden cliffs. Each condition differs from those that once trained the senses, creating an environment that does not easily translate into familiar terms. Marine scientists often describe the ocean as Earth's largest habitat, not because of its surface area alone, but because of its volume. Most of the planet's living space exists within this immense body of water, yet humans occupy only its uppermost margin. Our lungs draw breath from air, our bones bear weight designed for gravity unsoftened by buoyancy, and our skin protects against dryness rather than constant immersion. Even with advanced technology, prolonged descent requires protective vessels, careful calculations, and materials engineered to withstand forces far beyond ordinary experience. This difference does not imply hostility. The sea is not an adversary, only a realm shaped by rules unlike those of the land where our species arose. Its currents follow planetary rotation, its chemistry balances salts and minerals, its depths cradle ecosystems adapted to pressures that would overwhelm unprotected bodies. To the organisms that dwell there, these conditions are ordinary, as natural as wind is to birds or soil to roots. From the shoreline, the surface may appear as a single unbroken plane, yet below it extends a layered world whose true proportions stretch far beyond instinctive understanding. The mind, accustomed to landscapes measured in strides, meets this immensity and senses something vast enough to feel almost abstract, a domain real and present, yet forever, slightly beyond the scale for which human perception was first designed. Some reactions arrive before thought, rising quietly from layers of the mind older than language. Among them is the sensation many experience when standing near very deep water, a subtle tightening of awareness that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Psychologists use the term thalassophobia to describe this response, yet the word itself only gestures toward a far older inheritance written into the nervous system. For most of human history, Survival depended on reading environments quickly and accurately. Open grasslands, forests, and shorelines offered signals that could be interpreted through sight and sound, allowing the brain to anticipate what might approach. Depth, however, presents a different kind of information. When water darkens and turns opaque, it conceals rather than reveals. The surface may appear calm, yet beneath it lies a volume impossible to survey from above. In such conditions, perception lacks detail, and the mind responds by heightening vigilance. This reaction reflects an adaptive caution rather than a flaw. Evolution favored organisms that hesitated at uncertain boundaries, especially where footing could vanish or hidden movement might occur. The brain's threat detection networks, particularly regions linked to the amygdala and insular cortex, activate more readily when confronted with environments that obscure visibility. Studies using imaging techniques show increased neural signaling when participants view scenes of deep water compared to shallow or transparent settings. The effect does not require personal experience. It arises even in individuals who have never encountered open ocean directly. Part of this response stems from the simple fact that humans did not originate in aquatic habitats. Our physiology supports breathing air, standing upright, and navigating solid ground. When confronted with a medium that restricts movement and limits vision, the body senses a mismatch between its design and its surroundings. Muscles tense slightly, attention sharpens, and perception scans for cues that might clarify what lies below. The sensation may be mild, hardly noticed, yet it lingers like a quiet note beneath conscious awareness. Imagination often joins this process. When sensory information remains incomplete, the brain fills gaps with possibilities drawn from memory and instinct. In the presence of great depth, those possibilities may take on form, not as deliberate fantasies but as fleeting impressions shaped by uncertainty. Cognitive scientists describe this as predictive processing, a system through which the mind continually proposes interpretations for ambiguous input. The less it sees, the more actively it predicts. This interplay between caution and curiosity accompanies humanity's long relationship with water. The same depths that evoke alertness also invite exploration, drawing observers toward their edges to peer into their shifting colors. Within that tension lies a balance shaped across ages, a quiet partnership between the urge to approach and the instinct to pause, each guiding perception as steadily as breath. Strands released into water do not behave as they do in air. Instead of falling neatly along the contours of the body, they loosen and separate, each filament following its own gentle path. The transformation begins at the level of individual fibers. Hair is composed of keratin, a protein whose surface interacts readily with surrounding liquid. When submerged, the tiny spaces between strands fill, reducing friction and allowing them to slide apart. What was once a single shape becomes a drifting cloud of fine lines. Buoyancy contributes to this change. Though a single strand is light, it still possesses weight, and in water that weight is partly offset by the upward force of displacement. With gravity softened, motion slows. Strands no longer drop quickly but hover, suspended in gradual movement. Even the faintest current can guide them, drawing them outward into arcs and spirals that shift with delicate continuity. The result is not stillness but a kind of quiet suspension, as though the hair were thinking its way through space rather than falling through it. Surface tension adds another subtle influence near the boundary between water and air. At that thin interface, molecules cling more tightly to one another, forming a flexible film that can support light objects. When hair drifts close to this boundary, some strands may rest along it, spreading sideways rather than sinking, Others slip beneath, pulled by slight differences in density or motion. This layered arrangement creates patterns that seem intricate yet arise from simple physical forces acting together. To an observer accustomed to seeing hair shaped by gravity and wind, this underwater motion can appear unfamiliar. On land, strands align downward, guided by weight and anchored by friction against skin and fabric. In water, those constraints relax. Direction loses its usual consistency, and orientation becomes fluid. The eye, trained over a lifetime to expect certain patterns, encounters forms that do not match its stored templates. Recognition pauses for a fraction of a second while perception adjusts. Fluid dynamics offers an explanation for this visual effect. In a low-velocity environment where turbulence is minimal, flexible filaments respond directly to surrounding flow. Each strand traces the currents that pass through it, mapping invisible motion with visible lines. Because these currents shift constantly, the shapes they create never quite repeat. They unfold, gather, and disperse in continuous variation, producing arrangements that feel organic yet unfamiliar to land-adapted perception. Within this interplay of physics and expectation lies the reason drifting hair can seem unusual to human sight. The motion is entirely natural, governed by buoyancy, tension, and flow, yet it differs from the patterns the brain most often encounters. The mind compares what it sees with what it knows, and in that quiet comparison the unfamiliar lingers, not as something unreal, but as something gently removed from ordinary experience, suspended between recognition and surprise. A memory does not remain fixed once it is formed. Instead, it behaves more like a reflection carried across moving water, subtly reshaped each time it is revisited. Neuroscience shows that recalling an event does not simply retrieve it, but briefly returns it to a flexible state. During that interval, the brain may adjust small elements before storing it again, a process known as reconsolidation. Over repeated recollections, these adjustments accumulate, gradually refining certain features while others soften or fade. Details tied to emotion often become the most vivid. When an experience carries strong feeling, regions of the brain associated with memory interact closely with those that process emotion, strengthening neural connections linked to the moment. This strengthening does not guarantee accuracy. It increases clarity and intensity, making the remembered scene feel sharper and more immediate. Colors may seem richer, outlines more defined, movements more graceful than they were at the time. The mind preserves not only what occurred, but how it felt, and the feeling can guide how the image evolves. Language plays a quiet role in this transformation. When someone describes an event aloud, the act of choosing words organizes the memory into a narrative structure. Once arranged in this way, the story becomes easier to recall than the raw experience. With each telling, phrasing grows smoother, imagery more consistent, and transitions more seamless. Listeners respond to these polished versions, and their reactions can subtly influence future retellings. A detail that draws attention may be emphasized next time, while one that passes unnoticed may be left behind. Within groups, this process expands further. Anthropologists studying oral traditions observe that shared stories tend to develop distinctive features that make them memorable and easily transmitted. Striking images are preserved, balanced patterns are favored, and unusual elements may be heightened to ensure they stand apart. Over generations, collective repetition can amplify certain traits until they become central to the tale's identity. What began as a brief observation may, through many retellings, acquire a clarity and elegance shaped by communal imagination. None of this requires deliberate invention. The mind's purpose is not to archive events with mechanical precision, but to retain meaning. To achieve this, it reshapes recollections so they remain coherent and significant within the present moment. Psychologists sometimes describe memory as constructive rather than reproductive, emphasizing that it rebuilds scenes anew each time they are recalled. The reconstruction draws from fragments stored across neural networks, assembling them into a whole that feels continuous even as it subtly changes. Through this gentle reshaping, memories become living things, carried forward by attention and shared through voice. They travel across time not as exact replicas of their origins, but as evolving impressions, each retelling adding a fine layer of polish. What endures is the essence, the impression that first stirred awareness, preserved within a narrative that grows more luminous as it is passed from mind to mind. Across distant shorelines, separated by continents and centuries, certain figures appear again and again in human imagination, as though shaped by a pattern older than language. In coastal West Africa, stories speak of Mami Wata, a luminous water spirit often portrayed with flowing hair and a presence both gentle and commanding. She is described as a guardian of rivers and seas, a being associated with healing, fortune, and mystery. Her image carried through songs, carvings, and ceremonial art. Traders and travelers shared her tales along maritime routes, allowing her presence to drift from one culture to another like a current that never fully fades. Far across the world, traditions from East and Southeast Asia tell of sea maidens who dwell near reefs or in hidden palaces beneath the waves. In Japanese lore, Ningyo appear as strange aquatic beings whose forms combine human and marine features, while in other regions, stories speak of princesses from underwater kingdoms who rise briefly to the surface. These figures often embody grace and distance at once, belonging to a realm that touches the human world only in fleeting encounters. Their movements are described with a softness that mirrors the rhythm of tides, and their voices are said to carry across water with unusual clarity. Among the island cultures of the Pacific, oral histories recount guardians who watch over lagoons, channels, and coral passages. Polynesian narratives sometimes describe protective presences that guide travelers or warn of danger, spirits linked closely to specific places where currents shift or reefs lie hidden. These beings are not always depicted as half-human in form, yet they share the same essential role, standing as intermediaries between people and the vast surrounding sea. Their stories are told in chants and remembered in navigation lore, blending practical knowledge with reverence. Anthropologists often observe that such similarities arise not through coincidence alone, but through shared patterns of human thought. The mind tends to shape the unknown using familiar elements, combining recognizable features with qualities drawn from the environment. Water, with its movement and depth, invites images that are fluid, graceful, and slightly beyond reach. When imagination meets this setting, it often produces figures that resemble us just enough to feel knowable, yet remain different enough to suggest another realm. Carl Jung once described archetypes as recurring symbols that appear across cultures because they emerge from common structures within the psyche. Whether viewed through psychology or folklore, the recurring vision of human-like beings connected to water reflects a tendency to personify powerful landscapes. By giving the sea a face and form, stories transform an immense natural force into something that can be addressed, remembered, and woven into tradition. Through these many tellings, Separated by language yet united in theme, the image persists. It travels quietly from shore to shore, shaped by each culture that receives it, yet always retaining the same gentle outline, a reminder that imagination, like water itself, flows freely across every boundary drawn upon a map. Certain images travel farther than others, carried not by wind or tide, but by the quiet preferences of the human mind. Among these travelers, beauty often moves with unusual ease. Psychologists who study narrative transmission note that people tend to repeat stories containing graceful or harmonious imagery more readily than those filled with plain description. The mind lingers on forms it finds pleasing, returning to them in thought, polishing them in memory, and offering them again in speech. This tendency has roots in cognition itself. The brain processes balanced shapes and symmetrical features with particular efficiency, responding to them with a sense of coherence that requires little effort to interpret. When a story contains such imagery, it fits comfortably within perception, like a melody that resolves into familiar chords. Because it feels complete, it is easier to remember. Because it is easier to remember, it is more likely to be shared. In this way, aesthetic appeal becomes a quiet ally of survival for any tale. As generations pass, retelling often trims away details that do not serve the central image. Anthropologists observing oral traditions have found that narratives gradually simplify, retaining their most striking elements while releasing what is harder to visualize or recall. Descriptions become smoother, sequences more direct, characters more clearly defined. The process resembles erosion in reverse, not wearing something down but refining it, shaping it toward clarity. Each repetition nudges the story closer to forms that listeners can grasp at once. Romanticization plays its part in this shaping. When a teller recalls an event or legend, memory tends to favor impressions that carry emotional warmth or elegance. Features may be softened, gestures made more fluid, expressions more serene. These adjustments do not require intention. They arise from the mind's inclination to preserve what it experiences as meaningful or attractive. Over time, such refinements accumulate, and the narrative begins to glow with a gentle idealization. Cultural evolution reinforces this effect. Stories that resonate visually and emotionally are repeated more often within communities, which increases their chances of being passed along. Less vivid tales may still exist, yet they circulate more quietly, their paths shorter, their echoes fainter. Those that combine simplicity with beauty, however, move from voice to voice. With remarkable persistence, they settle into collective memory, becoming part of shared imagination. Scholars sometimes compare this process to natural selection, though it unfolds in language rather than biology. Instead of physical traits, it is images and motifs that endure or fade. Those that capture attention most readily tend to remain, not through competition, but through preference. The human mind, drawn toward elegance and harmony, acts as both listener and curator, guiding which visions continue their journey. Through this gentle filtering, certain myths acquire a lasting radiance. They endure not because they resist change, but because each retelling smooths their lines and brightens their contours, allowing them to pass easily from one generation to the next, carried along the quiet currents of memory and voice. High above the waterline, a quiet machine hovers, its small rotors holding it steady while its lens gazes downward. Through such modern instruments, the sea presents itself in ways earlier observers could never have witnessed. Drone cameras capture scenes from directly overhead, revealing animals moving beneath the surface with a clarity shaped by geometry rather than guesswork. From this height, The outlines of marine mammals appear unmistakable, their bodies traced cleanly against the shifting background, their motions measured and calm. What once might have been glimpsed from the side or at a distance can now be studied from an angle that removes much of the uncertainty once woven into observation. Perspective alters perception more than most realize. When viewed from a vessel at water level, any shape emerging, partly from below, is seen through layers of reflection, refraction, and motion. The eye must interpret fragments that change from moment to moment, assembling them into a coherent form. Aerial footage, by contrast, shortens that interpretive process. Looking straight down reduces glare and distortion, allowing the camera to record contours as they are rather than as they appear from an oblique vantage. The difference resembles that between reading a page directly and reading it through rippling glass. Underwater cameras offer another transformation of sight. When placed beneath the surface, they reveal how angles themselves can reshape bodies. Light bends as it passes between water and air, shifting apparent position and size. An object observed from above may seem closer or farther than it truly is, while the same object seen from below may stretch or compress depending on the direction of view. Filmmakers who document sea life often adjust their equipment carefully to account for these optical changes, knowing that lenses can exaggerate curves or elongate silhouettes if not aligned precisely. Footage recorded from multiple viewpoints shows how easily perception can change with position alone. A creature filmed head-on may appear broad and imposing, yet the same individual filmed from above may seem slender and almost delicate. Side angles may hide certain features while highlighting others, creating impressions that vary from moment to moment. None of these impressions are false. Each is a faithful record of how form interacts with light from a particular direction. Advances in imaging technology have made such comparisons possible. Stabilized drones, submersible cameras, and high-resolution sensors gather visual information with a steadiness beyond the limits of unaided sight. Scientists reviewing this material can analyze movement frame by frame, observing patterns too subtle to notice in real time. Through this patient viewing, shapes once described in uncertain terms become clearly identifiable, their structures understood in relation to angle, depth, and illumination. Seen together, these perspectives reveal a quiet truth about vision. What the eye perceives depends not only on what is present, but on where the observer stands. Shift the viewpoint, and the image shifts as well, while the subject remains unchanged, moving through its element with the same unhurried grace. Beneath the charts that outline continents and islands lies a second landscape far less familiar, one drawn not with ink, but with absence. Much of the seafloor remains unrendered in fine detail, its contours known only in broad suggestion. Scientists estimate that roughly 80% of this submerged terrain has yet to be mapped with high resolution, a reminder that the planet still holds expanses more mysterious than distant planets glimpsed through telescopes. The reason begins with scale. The ocean covers most of Earth's surface, and its average depth extends far beyond the reach of ordinary observation. Surveying such a vast volume requires instruments that can travel slowly and precisely across immense distances, gathering measurements point by point. Even with modern sonar systems, which send pulses of sound downward and interpret their returning echoes, the process resembles painting a mural with a single narrow brush. Each pass records only a slender strip, leaving wide regions awaiting future crossings. Pressure deep below adds another layer of difficulty. With every descent, the weight of water increases, compressing equipment and demanding materials strong enough to endure forces that would crush unprotected structures. Engineering devices capable of surviving such conditions requires careful design and specialized alloys, each component tested to withstand the steady burden of the depths. The deeper the exploration, the more exacting these requirements become, shaping every expedition into a delicate balance between curiosity and endurance. Light offers little assistance there. Sunlight fades rapidly with depth, so visual mapping depends on artificial illumination or acoustic sensing rather than direct sight. Cameras must carry their own brightness, and even then their reach extends only a short distance before darkness closes in again. Sound travels more effectively, which is why sonar remains the primary tool for charting submerged terrain, yet interpreting its signals demands time, computation, and repeated passes to confirm accuracy. Cost weaves quietly through all of these challenges. Research vessels, submersible vehicles, skilled crews, and analytical equipment require sustained funding and careful coordination. Each voyage represents months or years of preparation, and each hour at sea must be planned with precision. Unlike satellites that survey land from orbit, ocean mapping cannot yet be accomplished from afar. It requires presence, instruments moving through the water itself, tracing paths across regions that may lie thousands of kilometers from the nearest shore. Despite these obstacles, progress continues, measured in expanding patches of newly detailed seafloor. International collaborations share data, combining separate surveys into unified charts that gradually refine the global picture. With every edition, ridges, trenches, and plains emerge more clearly, revealing structures shaped by tectonic motion and volcanic creation over immense spans of time. Yet the larger truth remains softly in place. Beneath the familiar outlines of the world's maps stretches a domain still only partly known, its forms waiting in patient silence for the slow arrival of sound pulses and instruments, its hidden contours resting undisturbed within the vast and quiet architecture of the sea. In certain catalogs of marine biology, illustrations appear that seem less like records of living species and more like sketches from an imagination set loose. Yet each of these forms has been documented by researchers, filmed, measured, and studied, their existence confirmed not by rumor but by careful observation. They drift or glide through their remote habitats with no awareness that, to human eyes, they resemble beings from stories once told beside distant shores. One such creature is the barrel-eye fish, whose head carries a transparent dome through which its eyes can be seen turning like small green lenses. These eyes are tubular and capable of rotating within the clear shield, allowing the animal to look upward or forward without moving its body. Inside that lucid canopy, delicate tissues and fluid refract the faint light that reaches such depths, giving the fish an appearance at once fragile and precise. Its stillness in the water enhances the impression, as though it were suspended glass shaped into life. Another inhabitant of the deep bears the evocative name vampire squid, though it is neither true squid nor octopus. Its dark body stretches into a soft cloak of webbed arms lined with tiny spines, and when disturbed, it can fold these limbs over itself in a motion that resembles fabric closing. Along its surface lie small organs capable of emitting gentle blue light, a subtle radiance used not for display but for defense. The glow appears and fades in measured pulses, tracing the outline of a form that seems to hover between solidity and shadow. The frilled shark moves with an even older grace. Its elongated body and layered gill structures recall fossils from distant epochs, giving it the aspect of a creature preserved from another age. When it swims, Its motion is slow and sinuous, the long torso bending in smooth waves, while its many teeth remain visible within a slightly open jaw. Those teeth, arranged in neat rows, curve backward like fine hooks, an arrangement perfectly suited to grasping prey in dark water where pursuit must be swift and certain. Encounters with such animals often leave observers momentarily silent, not from fear but from recognition that nature's designs can exceed expectation. Biologists who first documented these species described them with precise terminology, yet even their technical language could not entirely conceal a sense of quiet astonishment. Each detail recorded in field notes confirmed that the forms were genuine, shaped through evolutionary pathways that favored function over familiarity. Within these living examples, reality reveals a talent for invention equal to any legend. The ocean does not imitate imagination, yet it produces beings whose structures echo visions once thought to belong only to myth. They move unseen through their dim realms, complete and ordinary within their own existence, while to distant observers, they appear as reminders that the natural world still holds shapes capable of surprising the mind that beholds them. Some stories move through centuries the way constellations move through seasons, changing position yet never leaving the sky. Their endurance does not depend on proof or measurement, but on something quieter that settles within the human mind and remains there. Psychologists often describe this quality as emotional resonance, a harmony between narrative and feeling that allows certain tales to linger long after others fade. When a story touches a universal longing, it finds a place where memory holds it gently rather than letting it pass. Longing itself has accompanied humanity across every landscape and era. It appears in songs, carvings, and whispered accounts, shaping how people imagine distant places and unseen lives. Cognitive research suggests that the mind is especially receptive to images that promise connection, beauty, or belonging beyond immediate reach. Such images stimulate neural pathways associated with reward and anticipation, encouraging the listener to revisit them in thought. Each return strengthens the trace, much as repeated footsteps deepen a path through grass. When a narrative contains these elements, it gains a kind of internal momentum. A listener who feels its pull is more likely to repeat it, sharing it with companions or descendants. Cultural anthropologists studying oral traditions have observed how this process allows stories to travel across generations with remarkable persistence. Even when details shift or settings change, the central impression remains intact, carried forward because it satisfies a quiet expectation within the psyche. The tale becomes not only something heard, but something recognized. Communities often serve as vessels for this transmission. Gatherings around fires, tables, or shorelines have long provided spaces where accounts are spoken aloud and received by attentive ears. In such moments, the voice of one person becomes the memory of many. The rhythm of speech, the cadence of phrasing, and the shared attention of listeners help secure the narrative within collective awareness. Once embedded there, it continues to circulate, shaped slightly by each telling, yet retaining its essential outline. Language itself assists this continuity. Words chosen for their musicality or imagery tend to be recalled more easily than those that lie flat. Linguists note that phrases with balance and flow remain in memory longer, giving them an advantage as they pass from generation to generation. Over time, these favored expressions attach themselves to the story they carry, strengthening its hold within cultural tradition. In this way, endurance arises not from resistance to change, but from adaptability. A narrative that resonates can adjust its surface while preserving its core, allowing it to remain meaningful as circumstances evolve. It moves through history, much as a melody moves through variations, recognizable despite new arrangements. Within that gentle persistence lies the reason certain visions remain present across ages, held not by force or decree, but by the steady inclination of the human heart to remember what it finds quietly beautiful. Light from a projector once spilled across a theater screen, and within that glow, the figure long shaped by centuries of storytelling took on a new form. In the hands of modern cinema, the image became brighter, smoother, and more symmetrical, its features arranged with deliberate care. Filmmakers understood that visual media could refine familiar legends into shapes that matched contemporary ideals, and in doing so, they guided how audiences would picture such beings thereafter. Animated adaptations played a defining role in this transformation. Studios such as Disney reimagined aquatic figures with luminous skin, flowing hair, and expressive eyes, rendering them with an elegance designed to resonate instantly. Animators adjusted proportions to emphasize grace, lengthening lines, softening angles, and balancing colors so that every frame carried a sense of harmony. These choices were not accidental. Research in visual psychology shows that viewers respond more readily to faces and forms that exhibit symmetry and smooth contour, qualities often associated with attractiveness across cultures. As these portrayals spread through film, television, and illustrated books, they settled into collective imagination. Children encountering the stories for the first time often met them through these stylized images rather than older depictions preserved in manuscripts or carvings. The cinematic version became a reference point, shaping expectation before any historical description was heard. Cultural historians sometimes describe this process as reinforcement, in which a widely distributed representation gradually becomes the standard against which all others are measured. Reality, when examined through biology and observation, follows different principles. Natural organisms develop according to evolutionary pressures that prioritize function rather than aesthetic preference. Skin may bear irregularities, limbs may vary in proportion, textures may reflect adaptation rather than ornament. These traits arise from survival needs, from currents, temperature, diet, and countless other factors that guide form without regard for human taste. The difference between artistic design and biological structure reveals how strongly perception can be influenced by familiar imagery. Mass media amplifies this influence by repetition. A single film may be viewed millions of times, each viewing reinforcing the same visual template. Psychologists studying memory note that repeated exposure strengthens mental associations, making certain images easier to recall than alternatives. Over time, the cinematic form can feel more immediate than any written description because it arrives fully shaped, complete with color, motion, and sound. The mind accepts it readily, storing it as though it were an observation rather than an interpretation. This interplay between representation and reality illustrates how culture participates in shaping vision. What people expect to see can guide how they interpret what they actually encounter. When imagination has been nourished by luminous portrayals, it may lean toward those familiar contours, even when the natural world presents something less polished. In that gentle leaning, art and perception meet, each influencing the other, until the image projected on a screen begins to glow within memory itself, as enduring as any tale carried across generations. Long before written history traced the paths of civilizations, the earliest human footsteps often followed the edge where land met water. Archaeological evidence suggests that ancient populations moved gradually along coastlines, guided by currents of climate and opportunity. These shores offered steady nourishment: shellfish in tidal pools, fish in shallow waters, sea plants gathered at low tide. Such environments supported travel as well as settlement, providing both food and natural routes that stretched across continents. Anthropologists studying early migration patterns have noted how these coastal corridors may have shaped the spread of our species. Rather than crossing vast interiors all at once, small groups advanced in stages, lingering where resources proved reliable. The sea did not act as a barrier in these moments, but as a companion, its rhythms marking time and its abundance sustaining movement. Traces of ancient hearths and tools found near old shorelines hint at lives lived in close conversation with waves and wind. Diet played its own quiet role in this relationship. Marine foods contain long-chain fatty acids such as DHA, nutrients essential for neural development. Some evolutionary researchers propose that regular access to such resources may have supported the growth of the human brain, especially during periods when inland food supplies fluctuated. While this influence formed only one thread within a complex tapestry of factors, it suggests that the sea contributed not only to survival, but to cognition itself, offering substances that nourished both body and thought. Over time, familiarity with water deepened into culture. Coastal communities learned the habits of tides, the migration of fish, the seasonal patterns of storms. Knowledge passed from one generation to the next, woven into language, ritual, and craft. Boats emerged as extensions of this understanding, shaped from wood or reed to float upon the surface and carry people beyond the horizon. Navigation by stars and currents grew from careful observation, transforming open water into a space that could be crossed with intention rather than chance. This long companionship left subtle imprints on perception. Psychologists sometimes note that environments associated with sustenance and continuity can evoke a sense of quiet recognition, as though something ancient stirs within awareness. The sight of a wide shoreline or the sound of distant surf may resonate in ways difficult to name, not because of a single memory, but because of countless generations who stood in similar places, listening and watching. Through all these ages, water remained both neighbor and mystery, shaping routes, diets, tools, and imagination. It offered pathways without roads, nourishment without fields, horizons without walls. Within its presence lies a record, older than any monument, written in the shared history between human life and the restless surface that has accompanied it from the earliest journeys onward. There is a gentle moment just before understanding settles, when scattered impressions begin to arrange themselves into pattern. In that space, what once seemed mysterious softens into clarity, not by losing wonder but by gaining context. The sightings recorded across distant waters belong to that kind of moment, one shaped by the meeting of environment, biology, and the quiet workings of the human mind. Vision does not operate as a passive window. It is an active interpreter, assembling fragments of light into meaningful form. When conditions become complex, the brain compensates, filling gaps so that perception remains continuous. Cognitive science describes this as predictive processing, a system in which expectation and sensation cooperate to construct what we see. Under ordinary circumstances, this ability allows swift recognition and orientation. In unfamiliar settings, especially those lacking stable reference points, the same mechanism may complete an image in ways that lean toward familiarity rather than accuracy. At sea, Many factors converge to influence this process. Marine mammals rise briefly from the surface, their shapes partly visible, partly concealed. Their movements are smooth, their outlines rounded, their gestures momentary. Seen from afar, such glimpses provide only partial information, enough to suggest form, but not enough to define it. The mind responds by resolving ambiguity into something recognizable, drawing upon stored templates shaped by prior experience and cultural imagery. What appears is not invention, but interpretation. Isolation deepens this tendency. Studies in environmental psychology show that extended solitude can heighten suggestibility and alter perception subtly. Without varied scenery or frequent social interaction, attention becomes more inwardly focused and small stimuli gain prominence. The brain, seeking coherence, may organize these impressions with greater imaginative participation. This does not indicate error or instability. It reflects an adaptive system working diligently to make sense of limited input. Fatigue can add another layer. When rest is fragmented, neural processing shifts, and the boundary between waking perception and dreamlike imagery grows more permeable. Researchers observing sleep-deprived individuals have documented slight visual distortions and momentary misinterpretations of ambiguous shapes. Such effects are usually brief and gentle, yet they illustrate how perception depends on physiological balance as much as external reality. Within these conditions, the reports preserved in journals and recollections begin to align with known principles of cognition. The observers were not careless thinkers, nor were they detached from reason. They were human beings encountering unusual sights, while their senses operated under strain, guided by mechanisms evolved to favor quick understanding over perfect precision. Those mechanisms have served humanity well across countless generations, allowing rapid recognition of faces, figures, and movement. Seen through this lens, the accounts take on a different quality. They become records of perception shaped by circumstance, moments when natural forms, environmental factors, and mental processes briefly converged. In that convergence lies a quiet truth, one that speaks less about illusion than about the remarkable effort the mind makes, even in uncertainty, to transform fragments of the world into meaning. Across the open expanse, the surface may appear still at first glance, yet patient observation reveals a quiet choreography unfolding just below. Subtle swells rise and fall, currents slide past one another, and faint ripples cross in shifting patterns that hint at motion hidden from direct view. Oceanographers describe these movements as layered systems, streams of water traveling at different speeds and depths, each guided by temperature, salinity, and the turning of the planet. Though invisible from above, they create a sense that something vast is continuously in motion, as if the sea were breathing in long, unhurried rhythms. Light descends only partway into this realm. As depth increases, brightness softens into dimness, then into a darkness that absorbs nearly all illumination. Below certain levels, vision yields to shadow entirely, and the world becomes known through instruments rather than sight. Marine researchers who send sensors downward often speak of this transition as entering a different environment altogether, one where the familiar cues of distance and shape fade away. In such conditions, the imagination can easily sense presence within the obscurity, not from evidence of figures, but from the awareness of space extending far beyond perception. Scale deepens this impression. The ocean stretches across a breadth that resists ordinary comparison, its volume containing mountains, plains, and trenches larger than many landscapes on land. Measurements expressed in kilometers or cubic miles remain abstract, for the mind is not built to visualize such magnitude directly. Cognitive scientists note that when confronted with dimensions exceeding everyday experience, perception often substitutes feeling for calculation, responding with a quiet sense of immensity rather than a precise image. That sensation can resemble the awareness of standing near something vast and animate, even when the source is purely physical. Within these waters, life moves continuously, though rarely in ways visible from the surface. Schools of fish travel like drifting constellations, plankton rise and fall with daily cycles, and larger creatures pass silently through distant layers. Each motion contributes to the impression of an environment that never truly rests. The effect does not arise from any single movement, but from the knowledge that countless motions occur at once, distributed through depths that remain largely unseen. Human perception, shaped by long association with living landscapes, often interprets such activity through familiar patterns. Psychologists suggest that the mind is inclined to attribute vitality to systems that change without obvious cause, especially when those systems operate beyond full visibility. This tendency once aided survival, allowing early observers to respond quickly to subtle signs of motion around them. In the presence of the sea, the same inclination can translate shifting water and hidden life into a quiet sense of awareness, as though the expanse itself possessed intention. Thus, the ocean's vitality emerges not from myth, but from perception meeting reality. Movement, darkness, and magnitude combine to create an impression that lingers gently within thought, leaving the vast waters seeming less like a place apart and more like a presence that surrounds, accompanies, and endures. At the close of a long reflection, understanding often arrives quietly, like light settling across a landscape after cloud passes. The stories carried through centuries do not fade under examination. Instead, they soften, their outlines becoming clearer as knowledge gathers gently around them. What once seemed like contradiction resolves into harmony, and the old accounts remain standing, not as errors, but as expressions shaped by the limits and gifts of human perception. Myths have never been simple inventions. Scholars who study narrative traditions describe them as interpretive frameworks, ways the mind arranges unfamiliar experiences into forms it can hold. When observation meets uncertainty, imagination supplies continuity, linking fragments into patterns that feel meaningful. This process is neither careless nor deceptive. It is a natural function of cognition, one that has guided understanding since the earliest efforts to describe the unknown. Through it, fleeting impressions become stories, and stories become vessels that carry experience across time. The sea played its part in this shaping. Its conditions altered sight, sound, and distance, presenting sensations that shifted with light, motion, and atmosphere. Such an environment does not offer fixed reference points, so perception must rely on inference. Neuroscientists explain that the brain constantly predicts what it expects to perceive, refining those predictions as new information arrives. In stable surroundings, this system produces reliable interpretation. In complex settings, especially those filled with movement and obscurity, it may lean more heavily on internal models, completing partial scenes with familiar forms. Within that interplay between sensation and expectation, meaning emerges. The accounts preserved from earlier ages become records of that emergence, moments when the human mind responded creatively to a world that exceeded immediate comprehension. They show how observation and imagination can work together, not as opposites but as partners, each contributing to the act of understanding. What results is not falsehood, but translation, reality rendered into symbols the mind can grasp. Over generations, these translations continued to travel, shaped by language, memory, and shared experience. Cultural historians often note that such narratives endure because they speak to enduring aspects of thought, curiosity, pattern seeking, and the desire to connect what is seen with what is known. In this sense, the longevity of a legend reflects the continuity of the minds that carried it, each retelling preserving both the image and the impulse that gave it form. Seen from this perspective, the old visions reveal something gentle and enduring. They show how humans meet mystery, not with silence, but with story, allowing wonder to become understanding step by step. In tracing these paths of perception, one discovers that the legend was never only about distant waters. It was also about the observer, about the remarkable capacity of the mind to shape meaning from fragments, and about the quiet kinship between imagination and the world it seeks to know.